G'day Year 11, welcome to your new topic, intercultural communication. It's one of the most enthralling reads of our generation, 10 out of 10, authentic review. What we are going to look at today is I'm going to briefly go through the topic overview with you to detail a bit more what this topic is about, and then we're going to go through lessons 0 and 1. Okay, so you'll need your course booklet out. Write today's, whatever the date is which you're completing this work, can you please write the date of that on here, as we're not in class, and as per usual, write the date there. Moving on. So topic overview. So what this topic is all about is communication and the communication process. So it's going to start with looking at what communication is in general, and then we're going to break down the different types of communication. We're going to look at how people communicate and how different cultures and interference can make that a bit more difficult, where we misinterpret information in the communication process. We are then we've already done these series in week 1, so we knocked out that kind of boring stuff out of the way. What we're then going to look at is looking at behaviour and how our body language communicates things, not just what we say verbally, but also non-verbally, and how much of an impact that has on the communication process and cultural and social values. We're then going to move into a focus study on Saudi Arabia. Our Year 12 focus study is Saudi Arabia. We're going to be looking at Arabic culture, but what I meant to say was that it's going to be a really nice lead into Year 12 topic when we do have to do a focus study on a particular country. So we're going to be looking at Arabic culture and how they communicate towards the end of this topic, and that's going to be a really nice lead into. So what I'm trying to say is that the content that we're learning here and now, similar to semester 1 as well, with all the core concepts and research methods, is still going to be super relevant in Year 12 to our course next year. So really important that we get all of this done. So with that being said, lesson 0, what I want you to do, these are the new core concepts for this topic that we need to rote learn on our concept cards. So I've double checked, these are all in the back of the syllabus. So if you go to the back of the syllabus, writing out a concept card for each of these key concepts, that would be fantastic. Remember to practice and rote learn them, because they're going to be the types of words I'll expect you to use in your next assessment task. Remembering use of concepts is a core part of any marking criteria in SAC for anything. Okay, so really important skill to have there. Once you've done that, we'll move on to lesson 1. So the first point we're going to look at, if you'd like to highlight, is how culture determines the ways that individuals encode messages, what mediums they choose for transmitting them, and the ways messages are interpreted. So a bit of a mouthful there, so I'll break it down for you. So we're looking at how culture, so our beliefs and values and practices, determines the way individuals encode messages. Now sort of think that of how we communicate. So if we're encoding something, I am giving you something, alright, whereas if I'm decoding it, I'm sort of downloading it. So encoding is kind of like uploading, so I'm giving something to you. So I'm giving you a communication message, whether that's verbally using words or non-verbally. See how I'm using my hand gestures here as well. That's what encoding is. When we're looking at what mediums they choose for transmitting them, that's different platforms. So all the different ways that we communicate. So for example, do we write it in a letter? Is it a text message? Is it a phone call? Is it face-to-face interaction? Is it through art? Is it through images? So there's lots of different ways we can communicate. And then we're going to be looking at the ways that these messages are interpreted, or what we call that is decoding as well. Okay. So first up, what we've got is a word bank on the communication process and how it has changed over time. So I'll get you guys to again work through that with the word bank down below. And what we're going to do, in place of me going through the answers, we're going to have a quick Zoom on the Fridays when all of this is due, and we're going to double check our answers and go through them then. Okay, so there's a cute little meme there about the history of communication using savage chickens, if you want to check that out, and how communication has changed. So it used to be face to face, you suck, and then they wrote letters and posted it in the mail. you suck, then it was a telephone call, and now it's via the webs. So that was pretty funny. What this is moving on to a visual representation of the communication process. Now, this is a really important diagram that I've drawn expertly, as you can see with my stick figure art. And this is how the communication process happens. So it starts, and it's really important, I want you to annotate the crackers out of this. So as I'm talking, pause, make notes, because there's gonna be a lot of follow-up work based off this diagram, okay? Both informally and formally with some assessment tasks, maybe. Sneak preview. So what I want you to do is, we'll start with the sender. So when someone communicates something to you, obviously there is both a sender and a receiver. So what the sender does is they're communicating something to you, whether that's through words, whether it's through a written mode of communication, whether it's online, whatever it is, the sender is encoding that information onto you. And that's sort of like, remember how I said encoding is like uploading, okay? So when you upload something to the internet, you're giving it away, okay? So I'm encoding a message to you, and then the receiver then decodes that message, or they download it, okay? And that's sort of how the communication process starts. Now, what we need to consider is that when the sender is encoding information or giving information to someone, all of that information, their views, their opinions, their beliefs, are all backed by, imagine having a backpack on, and this is kind of what this represents, of personal experience and cultural background. So the idea is that whatever I'm saying to you, I'm using based off my own personal experience and my life experience, as well as my cultural background. So being born and grown up in Australia, I have certain beliefs and values about things. I communicate in a certain way. So all of that is being encoded as I give my message as well. Now, I might not necessarily be aware of this sort of backpack, but it's definitely influencing how I'm communicating all the time, okay? And that's the exact same situation when the receiver decodes a message, okay? They've also got their backpack on of cultural background and personal experiences, so they may interpret something you say differently based on how they grew up, their own personal experiences, like I said, or their own cultural beliefs and values. So what can also impact the communication process method? So they're sort of the basics, is this thing called interference. So what interference is, so if you have a good message, the idea is that the sender encodes it and the receiver decodes it, and how the sender has portrayed the information, hopefully the receiver downloads that correctly with, the right intentions. So you're not going to be misinterpreted is the idea. What happens when a message is misinterpreted is interference. So things like background noise, okay? That might affect your message being heard, okay? So the sender then might have to encode that message a second time for the receiver to hear it, okay? So that's a basic example of interference. You've got language barriers, obviously. So if I'm speaking in English and my receiver doesn't speak English, there's interference happening there in the encoding and decoding process, because they're not going to be able to understand me because of a language barrier. Mispronunciation can also occur. So let's say the sender has said something and then the receiver has decoded that information with a mispronunciation, or they've misheard it even. That can change the entire meaning of the word. I'm sure that you guys, and it's not just in verbal communication, I'm sure you guys have sent a text message and autocorrect has changed it to a word completely different to what you mean, and that interference is going to change the way that your receiver decodes that message altogether. So that's a process to understand there as well. Body language as well can create interference. So if I was giving or communicating a message to my receiver, but my arms are crossed, I'm frowning, I'm looking down, they're going to interpret that message differently. It's as if I was smiling, open, and forthright with them. Okay, so that can be interference as well. You've got gestures as well. So if someone's talking to you and I start doing these ones, my gesture there is making you decode the information that I'm giving to you differently than if I wasn't doing that. It's the same way as that if someone's talking to you and they're pointing at you, okay, they're being very authoritative, okay, if their hands are up in a position like this, it's usually a preposition. So your gestures make a really big difference into how you communicate as well. You've got things like misspelt words, which you talked about with the text message autocorrect situation. And you've also got the cultural interpretation scenario there as well, which can create a lot of interference. And that's probably one of the bigger ones. So to help really exemplify that, I've got a bit of a story. So when I was in kindergarten, I had the opportunity to go and see because the Olympics were in Sydney at that time. We went to the Gosford swimming pool, and some athletes were training there, obviously, with their swimming. Now, the Indian camp was training there, and so I was, 5 or 6. Anyway, so our school got off the bus, and we saw the Indian team warming up, outside the pool area. And, we got really excited as kids, and we all started waving and smiling at them like this, right? So we made that gesture, and we were smiling and waving at them. To our surprise, the Indian swimming team didn't smile or wave back. They sort of looked at us a little bit put off and disgusted. They were like, oh, okay. And so we weren't quite sure what was going on. Anyway, later I found out that in the part of India that most of that team had come from, shaking of the hand like this means no, or go away, or I'm not interested in you, is sort of the idea. So the tactic is used, say like, you're in India and a salesman comes up to you trying to buy a product, and you do this. It means no, go away, not interested. And so the equivalent might be, sticking the finger up. So can you imagine the Indian swimming team being told, that some primary school kids are going to come see them and watch them train, and all these 5-year-old kids get off the bus and start pretty much, in our sort of equivalent culture, giving them the finger and tell them to go away and piss off, and that we're not interested in you. Like, that would have been quite shocking. So that there in of itself is an example of a cultural misinterpretation between the sender. So we were trying to say hello. That was us encoding the message and uploading it. We were taught that waving and smiling from our cultural background is the polite thing to do, and our personal experience would only validate and back that up, whereas they've decoded and downloaded that based off their own cultural background as being incredibly rude. So you can see the differences there in how that process happens. So that's just the first method of the process. So what then happens is, obviously the receiver is, after they've downloaded your message, because you've uploaded it, they are going to obviously encode a message back to you, and then you're going to download it as well. Now again, how they deliver the message is obviously based off their personal experience and cultural background. It may also be subject to interference as well, so the way you decode it might change the original receiver's message there. Okay, so that's sort of the process of communication as a visual representation. So what I want you to do after you've annotated and listened to that is, I want you to put that process in words here. So I want you to transfer the knowledge that you've understood visually, and I want you to put it in a written format. Okay, so I want you here to describe the process of communication, pretending it's out of 4 marks. Okay, and then I will check your work when you upload it in photos and let you know how you went. So you want to be describing this process. Okay, so remember, it starts with the sender encoding, decoding to the receiver, and then they send it back, and it's all based off, and can be changed and misinterpreted depending on personal experience, cultural background, interference as well. Okay, so describing that process for me. Now remember, the lines given is the indicative length of response required, so you need to be filling those lines up. I thought it might be useful as well, after you've done that, to give an example of interference. So this is the first example. So this image, as you can see, without context, looks a little grim. So it's obviously, if we analyze this image, it looks like it's been drawn by a kid, given the handwriting and style of drawing in stick figures. So a primary school teacher found this as part of a student's homework, right? This post went viral a few years ago. And she obviously, this teacher called the parent a little bit concerned, because what it appears to be happening is that mum is a pole dancer and all these men are trying to give her money, right, for her pole dancing services. And when she grows up, she wants to be just like mummy. So something, a young kid doing that could be misinterpreted as pretty disturbing. However, the context of the story is that the mother is selling a snow shovel at Home Depot in America. And so I'll let you read her explanation. But as a nutshell, this isn't actually a pole. It's meant to represent a snow shovel. So in America, it snows in winter. And this was the last one in stock. Okay, so she had all these people desperately trying to outbid each other to buy that shovel off her. So we can see interference here has happened due to different interpretations. So you'd probably class that as a mispronunciation in terms of a misinterpretation of the drawing there visually. So that's one example. Another example is a verbal example here, and I want you to watch this scene from Rush Hour. It is hilarious. I will put it. This
Writing's
link,
not that easy, but Grammarly can help.
I will
This
put this
sentence
scene
is
in.
grammatically
you can see by the
correct.
amount of views here that it's quite a popular scene, over 10 million. So I'll post this in the description below, and I want you to watch it and note on the side of your book. I'll just check I'm still recording here. And I want you to note on the side of your book just here which verbal area that they were misunderstanding in terms of their communication.